in 10 years time, am I still going to be struggling with trying to remember what Tai Yang formulas there are? And I was like, no, I want to have the foundations clear in my mind. I'm not going to think about how long it's going to take me or where I'm going. I'm just going to start. One of the big things for me was thinking ahead of time. It was like, well, where do I want to be as a practitioner down the track?
Right.
Because you can float along and just learn different courses and cruise along at clinic. It's easy to do, and that's what then motivated me. I didn't like the struggle in my mind of not knowing, being able to follow what was being talked about, or if there was a herbal formula mentioned, it's like, oh yeah, Chai Hu Guija Tung, Chai Hu Guija Gun Tung. Oh, what's the difference again?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. So happy to have you here with me today. And this episode is a special episode for students and people who are interested in studying not just Chinese medicine, but other things. Today, I'm joined by a good friend, Hamish Brown. He's an acupuncturist and a Chinese herbalist. And I think out of all the people I know in Chinese medicine, he's probably the person that has the best ability and the best memory of Chinese medicine types of things. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to memorize Chinese medicine, the importance of memorization, and how you can become a better practitioner through memorization. And we're going to try to pick his brain and let his secret sauce. So welcome, Hamish.
Thanks, Marie. Great to be here.
Awesome. And so you're practicing in Armidale in New South Wales, right?
Yep.
What's it like in that town?
Well, it's rural, but there's also a good academic and alternative group there as well. We've got the University of New England, and climate-wise, we get pretty cold winters. So, as you know, I like to prescribe a lot of blood-warming formulas.
You keep that factory in business for sure. Like, oh, Hamish's clinic is starting up again. We better make more of that stuff. No, but it's a lovely place. I've been there myself, and you've got a beautiful clinic and a beautiful town. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. So can I just ask you a few questions about how you got into studying like Chinese medicine, like not just like learning Chinese medicine, but like you have delved deep into the study of it and to the memorization of lots of things where, students, not every student does that. Let's just say that.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll answer your first question. How I got into Chinese medicine was through three main things coming together. One was my parents always used natural medicine at home. So I was always exposed to herbs and supplements and different things. And my parents also started an organic medicinal herb farm. So at the time when that was going, it was the biggest herb farm in the Southern Hemisphere. It was on a really big scale. So that was certainly a big stream of influence. And martial arts was the other mainstream. So I've been training for a bit over 25 years, and I went to do a martial arts instructor's course in Brisbane at the Australian College of Natural Medicine, which is Endeavour now, in the big mixing pot of Fortitude Valley up in Brisbane. And we studied some Chinese medicine as part of that course, and acupuncture. And this was in the days before it was regulated in Australia. So you could start, sticking needles in people just without much regulation. So I did a bit of acupuncture then and was inspired by it, but I knew I wanted to do I was interested in doing a more in-depth course. But then one of the other things personally that really spurred on my interest and motivated me to find answers for my own health was I had eczema. And that was something I battled with, and Chinese medicine has given me great relief with that, and I've been free of it for years now. So yeah, those three things: martial arts and learning about Chinese philosophy and exposure to acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And then I had a year in Europe and traveled around and decided, yes, I want to devote myself to a full course, and looked into the different ones and started. I started as a mature age student, so I was 25 going in, and I really wanted to test out my brain, because I walked out of my last HSC exam, for example, and I was interested in sport and girls and whatever at the time, and so I really didn't have much faith after that for a period of time, and well, can I actually apply myself academically? So I set the sights quite high personally for myself, and when we first studied Chinese herbal medicine subjects, the first thing you learn is just the categories of herbs. And I had the good fortune at the time to have to take a long train trip from the campus back to home. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start off really simple. I mean, I thought, there's so much information and there's not only the category, but there's the nature of the herb, the functions of the herb, the dosage, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, I found it a little bit overwhelming, and I thought, well, how can I just make this really simple? And I thought, well, I'll just first, start off with the categories. So at that point, it was, the first category in Venski's is wind cold, exterior releasing herbs. So I was like, okay, Ma Huang, Guizhe, Tsusuye, Jingjie, Fangfang, Chenghua, Gaoben. And I just started to go through, those herbs. And at the start, it was literally trying to put 5 in my mind, and then it just suddenly built because I just kept at it. I kept, catching that train. So I thought, well, I'll just keep plugging away. It was that really simple approach, and simple and consistent approach, that laid a foundation for my memorization of herbal medicine, acupuncture points, and then getting into the Han Dynasty classics and Zhang Zhongjing's material and what we've been learning with Arnold Wüstler's afterwards. So I would really stress to students, but also practitioners, because it's never too late to go back to the foundations. And in a sense, we really are responsible to continually do that anyway. In any art form, you always need to revise the basics, revise the foundations, explore them again, look back at them. So I would just say, keep it simple and consistent. So for me, what worked was just going through this in a very rote material way. And for some people, that will actually be way too boring. They just won't be able to keep that kind of consistency if they're not engaged enough. So, I remember seeing you, Marie, you had these wonderful cards with all these, different things on them, and like flashcards, and that was your system, and that worked really well for you. You kept expanding your knowledge of herbal medicine and the formulas that way. So in a sense, I think what's most important is you got to do what works for you in your mind and your brain. But I would like to stress that the way I've done it is actually really easy and simple. It's just, you've got to be prepared to stick at it.
Yeah.
That's,
okay.
I can't stress enough that you don't have to have an amazing brain. It's not like I've got a photographic memory or anything like that. I wish I did. We need more Chinese medicine practitioners that have photographic brains. Wow. Photographic memories, I should say.
So can I just ask you, on that train trip, how long was that train trip each time?
Yeah, I think it was about an hour.
And how many times a week were you going on that trip?
3 or 4. And
so it was going there and going back, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was from Strathfield to Bankstown.
Yeah.
Campus, yeah.
Okay. And so basically you do an hour of study before you go to the class, then you do the class, then you do an hour of study on the train. each time?
Well, I
roughly?
wasn't that studious. I was a bit
Okay.
lazier than that. I'd certainly be listening to music or reading or doing other stuff on the train as well. I just thought, I'm going to have to learn this. I better, start applying myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because like it is something. There's a few things that are really important that you brought up. One is like you can start anytime. A lot of people think I've waited too long.
Yeah.
It's too late now. And then when you do start, you think, I wish I started earlier. And they beat themselves up that they didn't, and then they maybe don't get into it more. Yeah. And also the importance of like that regularity of doing it. Like you just happen to have 3 times or whatever a week. But also like I know from when I was teaching and learning musical instruments myself, that my teacher would always say, like my violin teacher would always say, if you have a practice the night you had the lesson, you'll learn more. But you always feel like, I just had the lesson, I don't need to practice now, that was the practice. And she was like, if you have a practice the night you have the lesson, that's worth 3 practices. Right. But you feel like I've done it, so I don't need to do it anymore, especially when you're learning something that can be a bit arduous. Like you want it, you want the benefit of knowing it, but at the same time you're like, oh, I wish I could just tick it off and I don't have to do it. But it sounds like you would do the lesson in the classroom, and then you would come and revise that material like almost instantaneously each time.
Yeah. And then I would try and go over it at home as well. So that and sometimes, people might go, oh, I don't have enough time today. Well, that's fine. Just do something, even just sort of do a speed read through it, something just to keep your mind, engaged with it. And on that point of thinking, it's not too late, I didn't start my focused memorization of the Shanghanlun and the Jinghua Yalui until it might have been 4 or 5 years into studying with Arno and ICM and going through that material. What happened was I just thought, wow, there is so much here to learn. As you know, the amount of theory that is expanded there is massive. And I just thought, am I in 10 years time, am I still going to be struggling with trying to remember what Tai-Yang formulas there are? And I was like, no, I want to have the foundations clear in my mind. So I then went through this process of going through that. But I might expand on that later and jump back to at uni days. For a moment. So another thing that really helped with my memorization was the engagement at a clinic. So you don't have to be at a clinic until a certain time in your studies, generally, second year, third year, or whatever. I jumped in early, kind of by chance or fate, you could say. So I went to the oldest Chinese medicine wholesale place in Sydney in Ultimo Road, Chinese Ginseng and Herbs Company.
Oh yeah, I know that place.
Yeah. It's
what a classic. Special.
Yeah, so I went in there and Kevin Liu, who's the old herbalist, and he's still practicing there. He must have,
wow,
I don't know how many years. He's racked up a couple of decades just practicing there. And it's old school, China style, in the sense that you don't have formal bookings. You just sit on the chairs outside the room, and you just wait for an appointment.
Yeah, right.
I don't know originally if he thought I was waiting for an appointment or I was just interested, but he's like, yep, come in. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I was like, oh, well, he's going to give me a consult. So I thought, okay, do a consult. And then he prescribed a herbal medicine formula, and it was all in the running writing of Mandarin, Chinese. Actually, no, it wasn't. Well, Mandarin technically, but he was more from Guangzhou, Cantonese speaking area anyway. And I took that back and I wrote a page about the herbs, just, like in connection with what I was just studying. I was like, all right, so he's prescribed me, I don't know, at the time, whatever it was, Dungwei. So I wrote, Dungwei, warm-natured, nourishing the blood, opening the blood flow up of the liver, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Slightly bitter nature, blah blah blah. And I gave that to him, and then he basically invited me or accepted me as a student. So I had this routine where I would go back there once a week and sit with him, and put the white coat on and sit with his patients. And I would then, when he wrote the formula, I couldn't read it, so I would then have to follow the prescription with the patient to the counter, and then see what the herbs were that were prescribed. And I'd say,
Right.
oh, what's that? What's this? What's that? So students listening to this, I would say, if you have the opportunity to try and find someone that you can just sit in with or observe, or an old style clinic, or even a modern clinic, it doesn't matter, then just take it, because it's great not to wait. Try and forge your own path in that way. And after a while, I just thought, I'm getting tired of this process. Even though it was good, trailing the formula, I want to be able to read it.
Yeah.
So I then wrote a page and wrote Ma Huang, for example. And well, not that he was prescribing Ma Huang, but just for I'll say just yeah.
It's always the first herb, isn't it?
Exactly, it's the first releasing herb. So and then I copied the Chinese character from the book Bensky's, and then I would bring that page to Kevin Liu and say, can you just do your running writing of it?
Okay.
So each week I would bring him another page of herbs to go like that. And then I slowly got to be able to translate his running writing. And so that
you not only learned Chinese, but you learned his messy handwriting of Chinese.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow, what a commitment.
But it actually was fun, because it wasn't something that I thought, okay, I have to do this big project. I was just like, well, I'll start it and see how it goes. I'll see how this works. And that fed onto my interest as well, of keeping on memorizing the herbs. And then another thing I did was every week I was there, I'd buy like, I don't know, 20 grams or 50 grams or something of one type of Chinese herb. So I then started building up my own personal collection of the herbs. So that again just gave another layer onto it.
Yeah, I think you've touched on some great aspects for like when you're learning, because you've just touched on the idea that there's all these different learning styles, and sometimes if you are a kinesthetic learner, let's say you're a doing learner, you need to touch and feel and see the herbs and see them in action and see them in the clinic action.
Yeah.
And I know, like when I did my undergraduate study, it was kind of a bit like that as well. And there's this massive gap between this theory that you learn and then the actual real life stuff. And of course you have the student clinic, but I always tell like my students in Perth, like you need to seek out your own opportunities to find,
exactly.
Opportunities aren't going to just knock on your door, and practitioners aren't going to say, come to my place. But when students have come to my place, I've never said, no, you can't, come in sort of thing, right? Because practitioners want that, but they're not going to actively go out and look for that either.
That's right.
Because they're busy, and the good ones are busy, so it's great. That's an awesome journey. And so maybe you can touch on a little bit on like, this is sort of jumping a bit forward, but like let's say there's no degree in place, right? So that as in it's your own ongoing learning, and you just want to be motivated to learn by yourself. Like there's no exam or test that you have to be ready for. And so how do you find, like when you said you'd already done the classical Chinese medicine course, and so in a sense there's no motivation you finish the course, right? You just want to learn the content now even more. How did you motivate yourself to do that?
It's a good question. I like that, because for me, I would have liked actually some exams or tests, because they would have helped me to have kicked my own butt a bit earlier.
I think when I was doing the course, you seemed like you were the test. every time I'd go out for a drink with you, I'd be like scared that you're going to ask me how many formulas have guaja in it or something.
Yeah, I was like that annoying nerd that, wants to play memorization games too much. And like, okay, let's, so that it was so fun.
But we'll see, I find that motivating.
Laurie, because he was just, another league above me, and I just, it was great.
Yeah, but let's say you don't have that at the time, or maybe that was what motivated you. What motivates you?
Yeah, so one of the big things for me was thinking ahead of time. It was like, well, where do I want to be as a practitioner down the track?
Right.
Because you can float along and just learn different courses and cruise along at clinic. It's easy to do. And in one sense, I feel like at the moment, I'm in a little bit of a stage of that, because we haven't had that lovely interaction with, my peers and my teachers and my colleagues. So I'm kind of resting on my laurels a little bit too much for my own liking at the moment. But to snap yourself out of that, I think, well, where you ask yourself, well, where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? What type of practitioner do I want to be? What do I want to have in my head down the track? And that's what then motivated me. I didn't like the struggle in my mind of not knowing, being able to follow what was being talked about, or if there was a herbal formula mentioned, it was like, oh yeah, chai hu guaja tongue and chai hu guaja gunjang tongue. Oh, what's the difference again? What's the different herbs? How does it work? So if you want to get out of that sort of murky mud of confusion where things aren't clear, you have to find a way through for yourself that works. And for me, I just thought, well, I'm just going to go back to super basics again and learn the categories of the herbal formulas in the Shanghan Lun. And I just used the Greta's translation, and she had it in the back of the book, a section with, okay, here's the Taiyang, formulas, here's the Taiyang Fu formulas, here's the transmuted patterns. And so I just thought, well, I'll start with that.
Okay.
I'll start with that, and I'll just go, yep, these are these ones, Guaja Tang, Gurgen Tang, Gurgen, Guaja Jiao Gurgen Tang, etc., etc. And already when I just did that one thing, that one simple thing, just memorizing the names and the categories, it had a huge effect on my confidence and my ability to understand and follow things. But the really cool thing that I would then say this even more to practitioners now, it helped empower my judgment and my differential diagnosis in clinic. Just that one simple thing of knowing the names of the formulas and the categories.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point, because I think you get bogged down thinking I need to know everything. So I'm not just going to learn Guaja Tongue. I've got to learn all the herbs in it and the doses in it. And that's fine if it's just one formula, but then you're bogged down, overwhelmed. Oh, I've got to learn 100 formulas like that. So you're saying all you did was learn the names of the formulas and the categories first and memorize just that bit of information.
That's right. And you can do that, even if you just put 10 minutes a day aside, you can learn that material easily in a few weeks. And you know what? If you're a bit of a slow learner and it takes you 6, 7, 8 weeks, or it takes you 3 months, isn't it better to have put the time in and to have learned it, rather than 5 years down the track you still just haven't learned it because you haven't put that initial effort in. So I don't think it matters if you're a fast learner or a slow learner. Sometimes in some ways it's harder being a fast learner because you just want to digest it all, and your brain moves really quick. Sometimes it's the slow learners that will actually apply themselves and go, okay, just stick to it. So I think a lot of really switched on and intelligent people as practitioners can do themselves a disservice because they don't slow themselves down and go back to the basics and foundation and go, okay, I'm just going to revise that and get that knowledge in my head, more clearly. Because our Western minds, we seem to be most of the time looking for that understanding, that awakening of liberating the mysteries of Chinese medicine. So it just all makes sense. We'd love to see how things connect and, that whole understanding paradigm. But I think that's not balanced with a more pragmatic, structured approach to our learning as well. Like where the Chinese, are really good at that in some ways, they're probably a little bit, potentially a bit more skewed the other way. So I think if we can find that balance and step outside and see our own weaknesses and strengths with learning, it's just so helpful.
Yeah, that's great. It's really good. And it probably applies the same, right, for acupuncture, because there's a lot of people watching this channel that are acupuncture students and they've got an interest in herbs, but they're probably not at the level of like studying, because there's a lot of schools that just teach acupuncture these days and not herbs. But it's the same thing, isn't it? Like that you go back to just learn the channels, just learn the points. Don't try to think I've got to learn every point or focus on categories of points or something like that.
Yeah, and then when you first look at it, it just seems so overwhelming. How am I going to learn, as many points as there are in the days of the year? So again, I was just like, well, I'm not going to think about how long it's going to take me or where I'm going. I'm just going to start. So again, for anyone, I just want to try and encourage them to just start in some way. And the simplest, smallest step is going to be less overwhelming, and then it will just carry you bit by bit. You can build on it.
Right.
So with the acupuncture points, I did the same thing. I just I was like, okay, lung channel, lung 1, what's the anatomical location, da 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 da, and then I built on it. Just kept on coming back to it, and again, I'd study on the train, and I wasn't. I've never been a super academic where I'd put like hours and hours and hours in. So I don't want to give a wrong impression there. I just put the minimum amount of time in that was needed to be able to achieve that. Some other people that have a better mind than me would have actually achieved it faster.
Right.
So I don't think it matters how slow or how fast. It's more just have that really healthy reality check with yourself and go, I'm not going to avoid this. I'm going to now learn this, no matter what stage of learning you're at.
Yeah, right. And so what about one thing you're saying is you had a goal, like, I don't want to be like this sort of practitioner anymore. I have some kind of vision in mind of what I want to learn, or I don't want to have these things holding me back. But at the same time, you're like, I didn't structure it like, I've got to achieve this, I've got to achieve that in my learning. You were just like, I'm just going to start. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And, you might have heard of the book, The One Thing. Sometimes it's really helpful just to focus on that one thing first and then go on to the next step and the next step and the next step. Because, thinking, okay, I want to get to the stage where I, have memorized every, pulse combination, herb formula, blah, blah, blah. It's too overwhelming at the start. It really is.
So let's go back to people that might be studying Chinese herbal formulas, let's say. And I mean, particularly in the system that we do, there's a big need for the memorization. I found that more than TCM, like with just stock standard TCM, you could kind of rely on, I don't know, looking things up in books a little bit more, whereas it seems like you need more memorization. And I'm sure there's other systems of Chinese medicine that kind of rely on it. But can you maybe speak a little bit about how that's helped you be a better practitioner, like having the memorization there, even just for acupuncture or herbs or whatever?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, just with acupuncture, straight off the bat, you don't need to go to your book to look things up. You've got it fresh in your head, and when you're in practice and you're in clinic with someone else and you're learning, you've got a frame already in your mind to then give you a good link to the kinesthetic feeling. Okay, here's the point. Oh, you see someone needle it. So you can build that bridge. So I kept on finding that if I revised and went back to the foundations, the simple things, then the bridges would happen for everything else to be built afterwards. Whereas if you skip steps, then you've got to come back and keep on repeating it. So yeah, just doesn't matter what stage you're at, just start, really simple, go back to the basics and do that. And so with herbal medicine and acupuncture in clinic, having that information in your head clearly gives you a lot of more confidence straight away. And I know as a beginning practitioner, that confidence is so helpful, because it can be so daunting going into practice by yourself or with others, or thinking, oh, now I'm going to be responsible. Am I going to do the right points? Am I going to do the right herbs? So putting in that effort just to work on the memorization will help give you so much confidence, because you'll have the clarity. And it's very rational and logical, Chinese medicine. A lot of people, well, I mean, there is of course an intuitive side of it that you can tap into as well. But as far as the theory and the practice goes, it has a nice connected stream. Yep. So if you have that information in your head, you'll be able to write down the list of symptoms, and you already think, oh, okay, it could be this pattern, it could be this pattern. You feel the pulse, and you go, oh, okay, well, the liver position standing out the most. Oh, well, that points towards this. And then, okay, what are the formulas that are good for the liver, for example, etc. So it all just starts to build and connect. You have to go back and just get those basics in your head, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So just some sort of effort and some sort of framework. You can sing the formulas. You can make poems of them. There's all these interesting training methods that you can do. I actually also recorded my like with a voice recorder, myself speaking out the names of the formulas and the herbs, and then I would listen to that and try and follow along with it. So that's another cue that I would recommend to people trying. So with the acupuncture lung channel, from lung 1 to 11, you just go, okay, lung 1, da 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 da, lung 2, da da da, and then play that and see if you can beat yourself to your own words saying it. And it's just another way of imprinting that information onto your mind. And then of course the same thing with herbal medicine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Is there any sort of tools that you've come across that you thought, well, this is really great, this is really like obviously that's one of them. Is there any other things that you've come across that you thought this has worked really well for herbs or acupuncture particularly?
I might be repeating myself, but again, just keeping it really simple and then broadening it. So if I now expand upon what I memorized, and I suppose I'll explain that now so people are clear with it. And I wouldn't have thought when I first started that I would have been able to do this. And again, I don't have some special amazing photographic memory or anything like that. But I got to the stage where I memorized every single pulse combination in our system, which there's more than 100. And I memorized every single herbal medicine formula name and category, from the Jingui Yaloi and the Sheng Hanlun, plus all the herbs in each formula, plus all the dosages. So I got to the stage where all of that was in my head. It was about 30 pages of information, and it's not fresh in my mind now. I've been naughty. I've got to go back and do some revision. But I know I can get that back into my mind if I need to, and some of it's just still there because it's active in clinic. So I started with the categories, and then I plugged on the pulses. Then I plugged on the herbs. Then I plugged on the doses. So a lot of people don't do it that way. They learn a formula, they'll learn the name, the category, the dose, and the herb, and then they'll try to go to the next one. I found that's a harder way of doing it. I found it was so much clearer and simple just going through, well, the names first with their chapters, then the pulse added onto that. And of course, for a lot of people here, that might not be relevant if they're not learning a system like we have, where you learn a specific pulse combination with the formula.
But they might have particular symptoms that they'd remember to go with that formula, or they could learn the lines from the text.
Yep. So the lines was or is, it's a tricky question. The next project, because I started doing that with the Shanghai Lun.
Yep.
And you can just build and build and build with it. But it's really, like, I was surprised at what I ended up being able to hold in my brain. Like,
yeah, right.
I really didn't think that I'd get to that stage where all of that was going to be nice and tangible and I could just reach it straight away. So, and it wasn't like I spent an hour every day. It was just 20 minutes to 30 minutes every day, in the morning. So sometimes it would be, before the kids went to school. Sometimes it would be on the car trip to work, just some sort of rhythm. And with practice, this is one tip I would give as well, is often it's easier to do something every day than just some days of the week. So, and again, this is a different way of thinking. So a lot of people will go, oh, well, I'll have my study morning on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I won't do the weekend. I think that's actually harder and will leave you less motivated long term than if you do something every day. I think it's better to do 10 minutes every day than 2 hours every 3 days of the week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I haven't committed to learning the herbs like you have, but I have committed somewhat. But I've also learned a lot of things like instruments and stuff, and that's definitely how you learn them. And I think maybe sometimes I think about it like your brain has a fatigue, just like when you're learning an instrument, your body has a fatigue from it. Or you're learning a sport. You have a physical fatigue from that, and you need to kind of like learn something, cement that muscle memory, whether it's in your brain or in your body, and then have a rest from it. And I was listening to a neuroscientist podcast yesterday, actually. I don't know if you know this guy, Andrew Huberman, but I've just been getting into his stuff. Like I think you'd love it. But he was talking about the science of learning and saying, like, when you do a repetition of something, like let's say you have a repetition of something 10 times over and over and over, when you rest, like not sort of like, oh, looking at my phone or whatever, you just simply just nothing, just rest. Your brain is having a repetition of that, like something like 25 times more than what you are having a repetition of it.
Yeah, right.
So he was saying, like, you have a period, basically, like you might have 10 minutes of learning and then stop for 10 seconds or 30 seconds and then go back again. And so that's how you can learn better.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Rather than, but it makes sense what you're saying in terms of, like, if people say, oh, I'm going to do my 3 hours worth now, like it's really hard to stay focused for 3 hours for one thing at the same thing. And people kid themselves that they are focused. Like, let's just be real here. Like, you're not going to sit, like people say, oh, I'm going to have an hour of study, but that includes like checking Facebook and doing all these things that you're supposedly doing before you're really studying sometimes.
It doesn't necessarily mean that true hour.
Yeah, not everyone. Whereas if you just have 20 minutes a day, you're going to be really doing that thing for the 20 minutes a day. Yeah. Hopefully.
And getting up in I would generally recommend studying in the mornings.
Okay.
I think that our minds, usually fresher, and it's easier to create healthy, structured routines in the mornings. Often the day will go in a trajectory that you don't know, and other things, can come along down the track. I've always found that evening study is trickier that way, whereas morning you're like, yep, nothing's going to disturb me at 6 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, you can have a bit more consistency there, and you're fresh, and
Yeah. And I often find, like, as a practitioner, I mean, this might not be the case for everyone, but like especially for acupuncturists, you have that little time where the patients are lying down with their needles in, and like often I'll see another patient in that slot. So it's not always the same. I know some practitioners seeing 3 patients in an hour, but let's say you have that time slot where you're not doing that, and you're not sort of running around making up herbs or something. You've got 10 minutes often in that time where you just basically go and get a coffee or do something, get a tea or whatever you do. You might just waste that time. You could, if you were dedicated to it, you could just like flip open your book and go, right, I'm going to memorize my 10 formulas today, the formula names or whatever. Yeah.
That's right.
And another thing I really like about what you said about how you learned it is, like, especially if you're a practitioner at that level, or even like if you're a student, I guess at that point you would be practicing in the student clinic still. Learning it like that rather than going deep on one thing, like let's say you're going to learn one formula, all the herbs, all the doses, all the lines, all the pulses, all of that, right? And you're like, oh, I'm an expert at Guajitung, but it might not be a formula you happen to see that often. And then you're just like, well, I really, really know about this, but like you don't have the utility instantaneously. Whereas if you learn them all across like that, and then the next level you learn them all across, learning all the names, you have a utility of that instantaneously. Like the next day you're going to use it in the clinic, because you're like, oh, I remember learning all those Tai Yang formulas. Now I've got this Tai Yang patient. Which one will I use?
Yeah, I really think that's a good point. And so I had to remind myself to try and be humble at different times on that learning progress, because I would, well, 2 things. One, I would see some of my colleagues really understanding and talking about it and getting these intricacies of more of the dynamics and some of the deep understandings of the formula. And I was like, oh, I'm not really at there. I'm just, memorizing the categories. Simple Hamish kind of thing.
But now you're like, woo, you've surpassed.
Well, I don't know. I can't judge that, but I certainly feel that it's given me a base to which I can then hold those deeper understandings down the track and have them integrated. Where, as you said, I don't want to just be a master on Guajitung and can talk 3 days about that.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a broader toolkit, so to speak.
Yeah.
Even though I could talk for days about Dangwei.
Yeah, I know you can. And if anyone hasn't seen, Hamish has got a podcast episode just about Dangwei Senitong, if you're really interested in that.
Simon Finney and Empirical Health.
Yeah. But I guess the other thing to think of is what you said at the start is true. Like everyone's different and you have your own learning styles. And so if you've already got a learning style that's working for you, you're probably not even watching this video. So don't worry about that. But if you do, we're not saying change it, but these are just ideas. And I like what you said at the start, where you just like, give it a go, see if it works.
Yeah, try something.
Yeah, try something. It's better than sitting there feeling sorry for yourself.
Tattoo everything down your head, like just whatever. Like often we make so many excuses to ourselves to stop ourselves from starting.
Yes.
Just start. Stop the excuses. Try some way. Whether you're just started studying, you're in your final years, or you're a practitioner. If there's a part of Chinese medicine you'd really like to learn more of, then just begin that journey of memorizing information in some way. Because we can't practice, like we've all memorized to some degree to be able to practice. Otherwise we couldn't practice. So some people, oh no, I don't want to memorize. Well, you've already memorized things that you haven't even intended to, just from your own learning experience and going through the motions. So it's more just expanding your own personal knowledge and info so that you can be the best version of yourself as a practitioner, I suppose.
Yeah, we all want to be the best version of ourselves. Yeah, but it's true. And I think there's all these psychological blocks that can stop us. And if you just think, right, I'm just, no matter what you feel, regret you feel from what you didn't do in the past or whatever level you're at, if you just start now, I really like what you said, where you said, who do I want to be in a year's time from now? Yeah. That's how I got other degrees that I've done, because people ask me, oh, how'd you get your master's degree done? I just used to pull all-nighters do it in the night time, right?
Yeah.
Like, my friends and I used to joke about the 8th day of the week, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I wouldn't encourage people to do that now. And I don't think I could do those sleepless nights now. But I had that idea myself. I was like, in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, I want this degree. Like, what's my life going to be like? You know, no matter what, I want to have this degree. Like, I'm just going to get it. So it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to eat up the dirt or whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
And just, you know, bog down and get it. And if you put your mind to it, I think that's also part of it, isn't it? Like, if you really want it, then you'll find a way somehow to get it. And hopefully those people are on this thing asking this question. That's why they've clicked on this video to learn.
So I would also say to any of the listeners that may doubt themselves or think, oh, I can't do this, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. It doesn't matter. You don't need any special tools. You just need to find a way. It doesn't matter how long it takes, just to start the journey in some way that works for you.
Yeah. And what I love about Chinese medicine is it never changes. Like, you're not wasting your time on this knowledge. Like,
no,
you know, it's not like, oh, the latest thing, I've wasted all this time, well, not wasted, but I've used all this time learning this latest thing. And then 5 years later, you're like, oh, that's irrelevant now. We got to learn the new thing. Like, there's so much to know.
You can just swim, you know, deeper and deeper into, or further across. Like, it's just a huge, huge field.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
You're never going to learn all the different styles. So, I mean, you probably made that decision like I did. You thought, well, this really makes sense to me and resonates with me. I'm going to focus on this style. And that was really helpful for me as well, because after I finished my degree, I was a freestyling formulist. You know, I knew my herbs really well, and but I was finding this dissatisfaction because I didn't have as much appreciation for formula architecture and for restricting oneself to a certain path, so your practice and yourself and your mind would refine.
Yeah.
When I first finished uni, I was just adding different herbs. Oh yeah, maybe this base formula, and then tweak it with this, tweak it with, oh yeah, put another bit of that in. Oh yeah, I'm clever. I'll add a bit of that because that does that. Oh, I got that symptom, so you add that on. Yeah. And it was fun to start with, but it ended up being dissatisfying. So I'm actually, when I made that decision to then go, okay, no, I'm only using Zhang Zhongjing's formulas from the Shanghai Lun and Jingguai Yalwei. Oh wow, that was such a positive step for me personally, how I felt within my own mind. I wasn't feeling restricted, I was actually feeling more free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So because I wasn't restricted from my own inability to choose, because I was freestyling, I was actually more free to find, it's like you find yourself, you know, better potentially if you've got good boundaries and structures to bump up against, and to go, okay, well, this is where I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really helpful, making that decision and going, yep, I know I'm not going to be able to know everything in Chinese medicine. I'm not going to be able to be an expert in the spleen stomach school, an expert in yin fire, an expert in, 4 levels. I was like, yep, no, this makes sense. And it's more than enough. Like, you go through this really big stage of challenging. Is it going to be enough? Can I restrict myself to that? But then it's pretty fun how you realize it's more freeing than restricting.
Yeah, I reckon that as well. How long were you practicing TCM for before you did the classical herbs system?
It was sort of 3 years or something before I first listened to Arnold present.
Yep.
Something like that, 2 or 3 years. But then, he wasn't teaching his course then. He just came to do a short seminar.
Okay.
So that was my first appetizer, and then it was another 2 or 3 years after that
Yep. And then you started the course, the ICAM
Well, I
course.
started the course, and then somewhere through that, I don't know what point, maybe a year into it, or maybe less, maybe something like that. Then I was like, yep, okay, I'll bite the bullet and just
practice on you this system. Yeah.
So I've got all these lovely Chinese herbs in jars like you do in my clinic that I'm probably never going to use now, but they look beautiful.
Well, that's what I have here too, because some of them I don't use because they're the old TCM ones, but they make good displays.
Yeah, that's right.
So there you go. The old Chan Tui that we.
That's right.
My nephew always comes over and he wants to eat this because he loves
really?
he loves making
tea.
tea.
Munch on and say, here, have a cicada chip.
No, but he likes making tea, and he's not shy of this. He goes, "Oh, can we put this in the tea?" I was like, "I don't think your parents are going to let you come back over here if they hear that we put these bugs in your tea." He loves Huang Lian, actually. He just eats it. Like, I was like, "Don't you find that?" I didn't want to like predispose him to thinking it was weird, but he loves Da Zhao.
Well, my kids always just would go and have the gold cheats, like, oh, can I have some gold cheats?
Yeah. When he comes over, he goes, Auntie Marie, can I make a tea? And he picks just a random assortment and puts it in the tea, and I just let him make it. Yeah. Oh, wow. So he picks out his little herbs.
Sounds like he's a born alchemist.
I've been teaching him how to use this little tiny scale.
Oh, great.
So because he's only 3 years old now, but he's very smart with, he's very into it.
Yeah, cool.
He doesn't mind the bitter flavors, like, because he put the Huang Lian in his mouth, and I was like, "Oh, do you really want to eat that?" He's just kept on chewing it down. I was like, "Oh, okay." Anyway, so it's been really great to talk to you, and I think that this is super valuable for people, practitioners, and like students, and like it's a really big passion of mine, because I want to empower people to discover the power of Chinese medicine, and this is one of the biggest ways you can discover it as a practitioner. You even if you just memorize a little bit, you're so much better than you were yesterday, and all these things that you've talked about are so true. Like, these barriers that we don't necessarily need to have, that we think, oh, I'll start tomorrow, or
and be prepared to be bored sometimes. We're often always wanting to be distracted and feel good and be engaged and interested. Know that if you embark on the memorizing pathway of your own technique, whatever it is, it will be incredibly bloody boring sometimes.
Yeah.
So you've just got to suck up and deal with that, and then the next week suddenly it'll be more interesting again, or the next day or that day you might suddenly be inspired, because at clinic you'll use what you just were memorizing, even though you were so bored with it, you'll use it during that day, so it will come to life. So just be prepared for that. I think we're not always that good at handling boredom in our learning.
Yeah. And if we get used to it, it's then it becomes part of the process, and you embrace it as the process. And that's awesome. All right. So thank you so much for your time.
Marie, thank you for your time, and thank you for helping, inspiring, and educating and motivating Chinese medicine students and practitioners around the world with what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. So good on you.
Oh, no worries. I just like talking. I like listening to myself and editing myself. Can't get enough.
By the way, I'm doing singing lessons.
Oh, are you? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so my kind of consistency with my Chinese medicine learning and martial arts practice is even now, I do that with singing away. I'm just like every morning, 10 or 15 minutes. Mostly it's just in the shower, which is using a bit more water at the moment, but we've got a big tank, so it's okay. But
that's awesome.
The skills that you develop with memorization for Chinese medicine, you can apply to anything else.
Absolutely.
You really can. That once you know you can do that process, you can be consistent, you can do that same thing to another art form, which is liberating. It gives you a really good confidence. So it's helpful.
Awesome. Well, so if you want to check out Hamish's clinic, if you're in Armidale, he sees patients face to face. in his clinic. And you use Dr. Tan balance method for acupuncture predominantly, right? Or you use that as part of your practice.
Yep.
And Hamish is an accomplished herbalist, as you hopefully got the gist of after the talk today. So he practices the same system that I bang on about in this podcast all the time, the classical herbs. And he's very good at you're just a lovely person. Like, you're just very good at helping people. And like, I came to your clinic once to do some observation with our training, what would we call it, training day, to
supervisor instructor.
That's it. And yeah, I was just really impressed with how, I mean, it's probably just because you're a country town atmosphere, like, you know, your patients love
helps.
you. It's very friendly. And
to notice the difference with the style of people and atmosphere it's in a country clinic compared to a city clinic. So it was really refreshing for them. So and you service a huge area, because there's people that come from farms and different areas all over that rural New South Wales area to come to see you, right? They make the effort to drive across.
So you can look up Hamish's website, his Way of Water clinic. We'll put the link.
thewayofwater.com.au.
Oh, The Way of Water. Not Way of Water. Don't go to those people. Thewayofwater.com. There's probably some other website called Way of Water.
Yeah, I think there is.
Another Way of Water, the only way of water. So go to thewayofwater.com.au. I'll put the link below in the description. And
I'm guessing probably even if you just Google Hamish Brown Chinese medicine, it'll come up.
Yeah, maybe if you just Google who's the best at memorization in Chinese medicine, your face might come up now after this episode. In Google Images.
I better start revising again.
I'm going to make that my mission, to make your face pop up on Google Images when the people Google that phrase.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we can get that happening. So thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll have to have you back on again to talk about some other Chinese medicine related stuff, not just memorization and student stuff.
That'd be fun. Like, one of the things that I'm particularly interested in and would love to talk about is blood deficiency in a general sense, and blood circulation. There's so much more anemia happening in our society, and there's some really good tools that we can talk about as far as herbal medicine goes, nutrition, diet, supplements, to really help people build up their blood. Yeah,
that'd be fantastic.
Because if we don't have good blood going to our organs and our tissues, then we're struggling uphill.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And we'll definitely have you back on again to talk about the blood deficiency. And thanks everyone for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and then you'll never miss an episode. And we appreciate your comments. You can pop them in the comments below. And if we get Hamish back on, then maybe we can answer the questions the next time around. Thanks very much, and see you again soon.
Thank you. Cheers, Marie.